biggest questions you should always have when you work with artists or athletes is how many times can you do this? I remember asking an athlete once, it was a gymnast who had to do a flip, how many times can you do that? And he said, oh, just once a day. Because it takes so much out of me that if I try a second time, I might hurt myself. We're going to be shooting a lot of slow motion today to teach you that you can do so much with a little slow-mo on an inspirational piece by yourself handheld.
Anyone that's out here, you'll have a full feed of multiple cameras that are in there, so you'll always know what's going on, and you'll be able to hear Vince obviously through the PA from in here as well.
So we were thinking of blacking out the entire window, and then we realized these shades did more than well enough. What's interesting about them too is you can use them as light sources that are angled as well. There's one 2K behind you right there, so that'll be our front light. We also have a chimera that they have on a boom. We have a 2K back here that you can see is somewhat hidden. And when I turn it on, you see how it just kind of gives a little bit of a fill throughout the room, on your faces, everywhere, that suddenly brings the entire environment up. And then I've got a 1K that I can angle as we go. You get the idea of the thinking behind this, of controlling the light, making it pleasing. Higher light is almost always better. Backlight makes things look a little bit richer. Waiting on the audio guy again, you know? But when they don't do their job, and you don't have audio, you realize how it is 50% of the experience.
The most important thing for me is, before you even take any audio product or even use anything, is to have a brief with your director and find out exactly what is it they want.
We're going to shoot B-roll audio as they're doing stuff. I mean, there's a flamethrower kind of type deal thing. You know, it's kind of got to have that. 49% of actually the experience is going to be Robert's voice. So I told him, I said, I really need to hear, you know, the bass and every little level of detail that I could from Robert today, to have him kind of carry the audio portion of this piece.
The reason that we, have shotgun microphones, for instance, is to actually cancel out sounds from the side, pick up sound in front. That's also the same reason why you'll often see shotgun microphones mic'd from above to below, because you've got all of this sound around on the horizontal plane, but the ground often doesn't make that much noise. Now, it's when you can't get a shotgun microphone close enough in many cases that you'll use a lav mic. A lav mic is omnidirectional, picks up in all directions. You can mount them upside down, sideways, it doesn't generally matter. And in many cases, mounting it upside down will protect your audio a little more, because if you've got any T's, if you notice when you make the sound T, you'll get a rush of air heading downwards. If you haven't got a well-protected lav with a little foamy, or you're trying to hide it, often that'll affect your sound.
As far as the pattern of mics are concerned, think about focal length and also about filling the frame. If you, let's say, are doing a tight shot in a person, you want to try and fill the frame, maybe, or the person to third the frame with something interesting in the background, with a bit of fall off, but pretty much centered the focus on the person or the subject itself. Same goes with a microphone in terms of focal length. So you use each particular microphone that is actually suitable to that focal length. Okay, that's one analogy. Second analogy is signal to noise ratio. You hear Ryan talking about signal to noise ratio. ISO, for example, you need to have light. Now the thing is, if you crank your ISO up and you have a lot of noise, that's not conducive. So again, it's the same point in terms of where you place your mic and how much gain is going into your recorder. Is the same analogy as how you would use ISO more efficiently, and also practical light, as well as when you have to light your scene, for example. What Robert's saying is very important, therefore we're going to base the acquire audio in many different ways, such as maybe booming or using a shoddy, and also putting a lav on him, which is omnidirectional, and this is more focused. And then when we listen back in post, we can see which one is more conducive and which one is more natural as far as getting that rich bottom end that Vincent wants.
Would you do a mix?
Not really. So what happens when you mix two audio sources that have been captured a little bit further apart is you get something called comb filtering, where if you got two sound waves of the exact same source kind of just off center, what happens is you get a little bit of high frequency cancellation. If those microphones did move, you'll get a little bit of a weird washy kind of sound that sounds like in the high frequency as the distance of those microphones move apart from one another. So generally you're far better off getting sound from the one source. But as Clinton said, what we'll do is we'll record two sources. One of them will sound richer than the other.
I see a lot of people shooting audio pieces with the camera, or for example, even corporate stuff, against white Sykes in a very reverberant space.
So I shot something recently where it was a very kind of confined space, and it was a very boxy and echoey room. What do you do in an environment where you can't see anything visually, like you can't put stuff up to diffuse that sound? Or what would you recommend?
The noise in that case is the sound of the room. It's reverberant, you're walking through, you've got footsteps. Essentially, if you can hear your footsteps echo around a room, you're in a bad room to record audio. That's the same reason that lav mics were invented. You've got a shot, you can't get a shotgun mic close enough, you can't treat the space, the lav is going to be the closest possible sound source that you can get. So the closer you can get that lav to the voice, which will be, in the ideal position for it to develop the sound. If you put a lav too close, which is a common mistake people make, right up on somebody's neck, you can imagine if your ear was there trying to listen to someone's voice, it's going to be a little rolled off. So you need to get a lav mic in the position where the sound can develop. But in that case, you want to get it as close to that position as possible, and essentially make do. If you get to a position like that where you go, okay, I've exhausted every possibility, I have to shoot in this space, then you need to get your lav mic in the perfect position. If you can shoot tight, then you can boom very tight. I mean, you should be booming as close to the frame as the DP is going to allow you to, basically. The best audio is always just out of frame, and you choose your microphone based on that.
The closer the mic is to the sound source, the more frequency response or lower frequency response you're going to get. And that's what Vincent refers to as that nice, rich, full sound. So proximity is very, very important. Another trick you can do, just to quickly answer your question as well, is let's say if you're depending on the frame and what you're shooting to fill that frame, one trick is to always use a couple of C-stands. What I do is put C-stands and then you hang the boom out and throw over some packing blankets. And then you enclose the area in which your person essentially is talking. So what you're doing then now is confining that space where you're absorbing sound as well as diffusing sound to some extent. And you're minimizing reflections. It's the same way in which you would shape light and how you throw light and use cutters and cookies and so on and so forth to move light, exactly the same thing.
What about the dumb question, which is the green, orange, and red?
Oh, gain structure. It's like watching your shadows and your highlights. It's about not clipping your signal.
Generally what I will do on looking at meters on even simple gear like this little Tascam unit is make sure that I'm at the loudest. I want to be, say 6 dB lower than the clip. At the loudest peak. So that's if someone's, dropping something and that's in context with the film and you want to actually have that, or someone laughing loudly, you want to make sure that it never clips, but you also you're basically fighting against having the loudest signal that you can. You want to push the volume, but while also making sure that it never clips. So, kind of peaking around that -6 mark, and your levels bouncing generally around that -12 kind of mark is usually the sweet spot that I'll run for.
So if you don't know how to read for example, the DBFS, or what we call scales, as far as light's concerned, this average, like I said, around -12 and peak around -6, and you'll be fine. That's a general rule of thumb.
So should you ever be in the orange, or should you always be in the green? In other words, when you reach that slamming door or the laugh, is that where you should be entering the orange area and never clipping into the red? Is that the safe zone for the really loud stuff? And you want to get your bass level at the top of the green?
That's the idea. So you got to
looking at it.
It is, yeah, and it depends on what you're recording. If it's very dynamic, the sound. If you've got a big difference between your louds and your quiets, but your orange is essentially in the broadcast sense. It's a bit of a warning that you're approaching your clip. The one key aspect though is just don't clip, and it depends on the performance of your gear as well. If you're running into a DSLR camera with an on-camera microphone, you want to push as much of that volume as you can. You want to be on the upper end of that because the camera is noisy. It's got a lot of noise down in that low level, so you want to keep it as far out of that as you can. But essentially at the same time, make sure you don't clip the gear. So on something like this, I've got a lot of freedom. I'm using a Sound Devices mixer here. It's got a very nice pre. It's got a very low noise floor. So I know that even if I'm running far too low, I can always push it in post and it's going to be clean, right? A lot of the time you won't have that luxury, so you want to make sure that you've got the happy medium. But as Vincent said, having it up around the top of that green is essentially your guideline, as long as you don't clip.
Let's say you do a bit of an amplitude type of boost and then you compress it on top of that. How much of that is actually going to be noisier by doubling this up? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's a ratio that is kind of like...
When you talk about normalization, it actually is compression.
Yeah.
So if you don't record your source properly, you're going to amplify all that noise.
Yeah.
So think about, and compression also is taking everything else. If I can use an analogy, these are your waveforms. So waveforms have different levels, right? Here's the softest point. Here's the loudest point. I'm squashing all the loud bits down here, and then now I'm bringing everything back up so it's audible. see how my right hand now is bringing that noise floor up as well. So how you capture the source is very, very important.
Stupid trick that I was taught earlier on as a one-man band was to split a mono mic on a Y splitter into a recorder and record highlights and protect my highlights a little bit. You want to talk about that?
You can actually record a multi-mono, which means you're recording 2 channels. Often you've got a stereo input in your gear. Even if you're running directly into a camera with a 3.5mm jack, you've got 2 channels there that are both summing to the same signal. So what you can do is you can use those and you can split them out and have one coming in at a lower level, and that basically gives you a safety. So if you've got the ability to push your audio levels, you can make sure you've got a nice hot signal coming in with low noise, and if something happens that peaks the audio, you've got that safety track at 10 decibels or 20 decibels lower.
In this case, these types of material, like these jackets, they tend to be very noisy. So you kindly ask your talent, look, can you take that off? And also, where can I exactly mount the mic itself?
He's talking straight to camera, so we're fine to put the microphone in the middle. One thing that you might consider, if you've got someone that's doing a kind of a discussion with somebody else and they're going to be turning their head to the side, you want to have the microphone on the side that they're going to be turning their head to. You don't want to put it over here and then all of a sudden the audio drops off every time they turn. In this case, it's going to be direct on axis sound, so we're fine. It'll be a fixed head position to pick up the audio of the lav. Now, the one consideration that we want to have with this lav is getting it to the point that the sound, it's kind of like chasing the flame of the audio. There's a hot spot where the audio will go from being dull to all of a sudden you just hear a little bit of presence. And that'll be, usually about 6 to 8 inches from the mouth on the sternum is a really good starting position, because that's where the audio no longer sounds rolled off, because you're not hearing that, articulation of the mouth when it's too high up to the neck. And as you get further down, you lose all that presence. It no longer sounds close enough. It doesn't sound big. So you want to get it to that point where you've got the sound developing and then you can stop. Often listen, use your ears, pop a pair of headphones on and just move it and get them to speak.
Our brains are so used to tuning stuff out. So when you do scale location, put the headphones, the same as like you'd look through a viewfinder, you're not just going to kind of look around and go, yeah, the light's fine. Put the headphones on and have a listen, because it is so much more sensitive, particularly in that low end.
So that's a really good point. So once you've got that mic position sounding good, what I'm doing, I'm not listening to, for the emotion in the piece. I'm not listening for any of that. I'm listening to make sure that a bus doesn't go past and honk its horn, that no one noticed.
And let's be honest, how many of you have an audio guy in your tech scout? Never happens. So as a director, as a producer, as a DP, whatever, you should be listening. You're looking for refrigerators, air conditioners, airports nearby, heliports nearby, trash can pickups, streets. Those damn little birds out there are worst enemy.
Pool filters.
Pool filters. I mean, it's your responsibility to actually say, this is not a good location. I knew that immediately about the other one. And immediately, you're going to pay. I mean, the audio guy is going to do the best he can, but you're the one who's going to pay at the end of the day.
So in this case now, what I'm going to do is, we have 2 options. We can either lav with a lav mic where you can clip on, but sometimes you also got to see and assess what the person's wearing, and then working out how closely you can place that mic. And in this case, I have decided to go with a pin mic. And what's really cool about this pin mic is it allows you to actually pin through fabric, and then allow you to place the diaphragm on the opposite side of the fabric itself, and it looks like a little button. So in this case, I'm going to place that pin mic just here where maybe the sternum is.
If anything that you take away from this interview situation, this is probably one of the most important things audio-wise. Record about 30 seconds to a minute of silence in the room. Now, if you've got changes in the sound of the room, for instance, something comes on that you didn't notice on set, you've got the sound of outside changes for whatever reason, it's peak hour now, you want to be able to blend that background track rather than things changing constantly. The sound of a bus goes past in the best part, you didn't notice it, you can blend that in with some extra noise in the background later to fix up your track, rather than it constantly shifting. It's kind of like if you saw a clock ticking around the wall every time you cut the shots, it would ruin the piece.
When you work with a piece of glass, do you feel fear, or do you feel excitement, or something else?
When we do larger exhibition pieces, definitely excitement and a lot of anxiety, because once that piece is on the end of the blowpipe, there's no giving up. It's got to be worked continuously until it ends up in the oven. When you work glass, usually you work as a team. It's a dance. It's a choreographed dance where everyone has to understand the role of the other person, and they act accordingly to help that object quickly move along its demanding path into the oven to be pulled out the next day, hopefully as a beautiful looking thing.
Roll camera. And action. Okay, now do an arc around her, counterclockwise arc. I think the piece will be quite beautiful when you get a chance to actually work it and look at it. We've got some really nice footage. The audio sounded great. You saw how important that was to kind of carry that foundation.